When Jesus and the disciples reached the top of the Mount of Olives, he told 8 of the disciples to stay where they were and rest, and he took Peter, James, and John a little bit farther. When they reached the olive press just outside the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus told Peter, James, and John to stand watch there, that he was going to the garden to pray. Jesus then walked alone toward the center of the garden, and he was so anguished that he fell on his face and began to pray. He knew that he had torture and an agonizing death ahead of him. He was in such anguish that the urea and other toxins in his bloodstream reached abnormal levels. One of the consequences of this condition was that the sweat pouring off of his body was as dark as drops of blood. He prayed that God would remove this responsibility from his shoulders, but he also prayed not that his will be done, but that God's will be done. As it often happens in our own lives when we pray, God sent an angel not to remove the responsibility from Jesus' shoulders, but to comfort him and give him the strength to face the trials that were to come. 3 times Jesus rose from his prayers to check on his disciples. All 3 times he found the disciples asleep. The 3rd and final time, Jesus heard the sound of soldiers coming to arrest him. As a signal to the soldiers, Judas greeted Jesus with a kiss. That told them who to arrest. "You would betray me with a kiss?" Jesus then turned to the soldiers. "Whom do you seek?"
"We're looking for Jesus."
"I am he." When Jesus said that, those soldiers actually fell backward and landed on each other. They didn't know what kind of power he was going to use against them. "I say again, whom do you seek?"
"I already told you, we're looking for Jesus."
"I am the one you seek. Take me, and let the others go." They made a move toward Jesus, and Peter whipped out his sword and swung it at the first person who came near. With the first sweep of that sword, he relieved the high priest's servant of his ear, and if that servant had not ducked his head, he probably would have relieved him of his head. "Peter, put away your sword. Don't you realize that if I would, I could call upon 6 legions of angels to help me? He that lives by the sword shall die by the sword." And with that he picked up the high priest's servant's ear, put it back on, and it was perfectly healed. Then all kinds of confusion broke loose. Those soldiers started grabbing anybody and everybody they could. The disciples were scattering like birds. They even grabbed John Mark, who was standing there with a sheet around himself, and John Mark ran away, leaving the sheet behind him. 9 of the disciples didn't stop running until they got to Mary and Martha's house at Bethany. Peter and John, regaining their courage, followed at a safe distance so they could get through the city gates before the gates of Jerusalem closed again. Now, while all of that was going on, I was at home in bed in Jerusalem, just sleeping away, but all the commotion of these people going through the streets, this mob, woke me up, and I looked out the window. Well, the first thing I seen was John Mark running down the street naked. Boogity boogity. Then I saw a whole bunch of soldiers going through the streets with Jesus, just pushing him like a criminal. So as not to make the same mistake as John Mark, I got myself dressed and I followed them, kind of figuring that they were headed toward the home of Annas, the high priest. I knew that something really heavy was going down.
If in the dusk of the twilight
dim he the regions afar. Will not the deepening darkness brighten the glittering stars, whispering hope? Oh, how welcome thy voice, making my heart in its song